Imagine putting your savings in the safest bank in Scotland. Not a gamble, the safe choice, the bank your minister used, the bank your father trusted. Now imagine that bank collapses, and a letter arrives telling you that you don't just lose your savings, you owe more. The law is coming for your house, your furniture, your wife's jewellery, everything you will ever earn. Because buried in the ownership of that bank was a single word almost nobody had read: unlimited. In 1878, the City of Glasgow Bank failed, and that one word destroyed close to 1,800 families in a matter of weeks. Respectable, careful people, ruined not for gambling, but for trusting. This is the story of the cruellest collapse in British banking history, and the men who cooked the books that caused it walked away with less punishment than their victims. To understand the cruelty, you first have to understand the trust. The City of Glasgow Bank was founded in 1839, and it did something clever and popular. It took banking to ordinary people. While the grand old bank served merchants and aristocrats, this one threw open branches across the west of Scotland, in the towns, the suburbs, the working districts. It welcomed the small saver, the shopkeeper, the parish minister, the widow with a little money to protect. And they came, in their thousands. To an ordinary Scot in the 1870s, the City of Glasgow Bank wasn't a risk. It was where you went to avoid risk. Its name was a byword for safety. And here is the detail that turns the whole story into a tragedy. Many of these ordinary people didn't just deposit money in the bank. They bought a share of it, one, maybe two shares, as a sensible, respectable nest egg. A stake in the safest institution they knew. They had no idea that by owning that share, they had signed up to something with no bottom to it. Because a shareholder in the City of Glasgow Bank carried what was called unlimited liability, and almost none of them understood what those two words would one day cost. Let me explain the trap, because it's the black heart of this entire story. Today, if you buy shares in a company and that company goes bankrupt, you lose what you put in. Your shares become worthless, and that's the end of it. Your house is safe. That's called limited liability, and we take it for granted. But in 1878, that protection did not exist for the shareholders of this bank. Their liability was unlimited, which meant that if the bank failed owing money, the shareholders didn't just lose their investment. They were personally on the hook for the bank's debts. All of them, down to their last possession. Think about what that does. A widow who owned a single share worth £100 wasn't risking £100. She was standing behind a fraction of a multi-million-pound bank, and if that bank lost more than it had, the law could demand she pay and pay and pay until she had nothing left. Not until her share was gone, until she was gone. For years this didn't matter, because the bank looked rock solid. The accounts were published, the reserves were healthy, the dividends arrived like clockwork. There was just one problem with those beautiful reassuring accounts. Every single one of them was a lie. Behind the marble and the trust, the City of Glasgow Bank was rotten, and its own directors knew it. For years, the bank had been pouring enormous sums into a handful of wildly speculative ventures. Farming and land schemes on the other side of the world in Australia and New Zealand, mining stocks, American railway shares, risky trading in the East. Not careful little loans, colossal, reckless bets, lent to a tiny circle of firms who couldn't pay it back. The losses were mounting into the millions. And rather than admit it, the directors did the thing that turns a failure into a crime. They faked the books. They overstated the bank's gold reserves. They understated what it owed. They inflated the value of assets that were, in truth, nearly worthless. They published balance sheets showing a healthy, profitable bank paying comfortable dividends, while the real numbers underneath showed a black hole. Year after year, the manager Robert Stronach and the board signed their names to figures they knew were false, and handed them to the very shareholders whose homes were silently guaranteeing the whole thing. Every reassuring report those families read was another turn of the rope, and in the autumn of 1878 the rope ran out. If you're the kind of person who wants to know how the giants really fall, the trust, the lie, the reckoning, do me a favour and hit subscribe. This channel is small, every single subscriber genuinely moves the needle, and there's a new collapse every week. That's it. Now, let's watch it all come down. In October 1878, the City of Glasgow Bank stopped payment and shut its doors. At first, to the public, it looked like just another bank failure. Bad, but survivable. Then the investigators went in and opened the real books, the ones the public had never seen. And what they found stunned the country. The bank wasn't a little short. Its debts exceeded everything it owned by more than £6 million, a staggering, almost unimaginable sum for the time. The healthy institution in the published accounts had never existed. It was a fraud wearing the costume of the safest bank in Scotland, and now that single word came for its victims. Because the shareholders had unlimited liability, the law turned to them to cover that £6 million hole. Not the directors who caused it, the ordinary shareholders. The letters went out across Scotland, a call on every share demanding payment, and the calls were monstrous, not the £100 a share had cost, but sums running into thousands of pounds for every share held. Demands that no shopkeeper, no minister, no widow could ever meet. There was no ceiling, no protection, no mercy in the law. If you owned a piece of that bank, you owed a piece of that whole, and the law would take your house, your furniture, your savings, everything you owned and everything you might ever earn, until the debt was paid. Overnight, trusting the safe bank became the most expensive mistake of these families' lives. The scale of the ruin is hard to comprehend even now. Of roughly 1,800 shareholders, all but 254 were financially destroyed, bankrupted, wiped out. More than 1,500 families, many of them careful, comfortable, respectable people who had never speculated on anything in their lives, lost everything because the law made them pay for a fraud they had no idea was happening. The horror gripped the whole nation. So many innocent people had been ruined that the public set up a national relief fund, and ordinary Scots donated hundreds of thousands of pounds just to keep the victims from the poorhouse. And here is the bitter twist, the part that should make your blood run cold. The depositors, the people who'd simply kept their cash in the bank, got their money back. It was the owners, the small shareholders, who were sacrificed to pay for it. And the men who actually built the lie, Robert Stronach, the manager and the directors, were arrested and put on trial in Edinburgh in January 1879. They were found guilty of fraud. And their punishment for destroying 1,800 families? Stronach and the director Lewis Potter got 18 months. The rest got 8 months, while their victims served a life sentence of poverty. The men who signed the lie walked free before some of the ruined families had even finished selling their furniture. But the ruin of the City of Glasgow Bank changed Britain forever, and this is the one piece of justice in the whole story. The country was so horrified that innocent shareholders could be stripped of everything they owned that within a year, the law itself was rewritten. Unlimited liability for bank shareholders was effectively killed off. From then on, when you bought a share, you could only lose what you paid. Never your home, never your future. The protection that every investor on earth now takes for granted was bought with the ruin of 1,800 Scottish families. Their catastrophe is the reason your losses have a limit. A bank so trusted its name meant safety, a word so small nobody read it, and a lie so large it took the homes, the furniture and the futures of the very people who believed. One word, unlimited. Gone bust. If this story got to you, do 3 quick things. Hit like, it genuinely helps this small channel reach more people. Subscribe because there's a new collapse every single week. And tell me in the comments, should the directors have gone down for 8 months or 18 years? Something very exciting coming next on Gone Bust. Subscribe so you don't miss how the giants fall.